In Iowa City in 1925, you could stop at the bank and deposit your check, and then head next door to pick up some groceries and have a chat with the shop owner about how business was going. Today you can walk downtown, snap a quick pic of your check to deposit, and then head into Target to grab what you need and get out quickly to get back to your reality TV show waiting for you at home. These are pictures from Frederick, Kent. He started taking pictures for the university in the early 1900s and continued until his death in 1984. Kent was doing more than just documenting the town he lived and worked in. He was preserving a part of American history, a history that shows a different America, one before instant communication and before mass production was optimized to get products to almost every corner of the US. A time when you could show up to the movies early to hear current world news as an appetizer for the main show. Now in one swift motion, you can find out just about anything happening in any part of the world on your phone. Early American towns have a different feel to them, even just by looking at them in pictures. These brick and mortar structures were built with care and planning to a level we don't see much of anymore with respect to the materials. Many small towns are just visually stunning with the amount of detail put into the buildings. In this project, I wanted to explore the small towns of Iowa and see how they appear now in 2020, and see if they still had this feel to them. In many areas, the tops of the buildings can be seen accented with simple yet striking designs, each building with its own unique pattern. Also on the buildings, I love seeing protruding advertisements, as I feel like they are a staple of this time period. This is how most people would see your business for the first time. Now businesses are spending millions on research to see how much time the average person will spend looking at their Instagram ad, and do anything they can to try and raise that number by even just 1 second. America has come a long way since its inception in the late 18th century. Starting out as nothing more than a few immigrants, cities like New York and Los Angeles show how the American spirit is still alive and well today, at least in the cities. While metropolises are thriving, it is very apparent that Father Time is taking its toll on the heartland of America and its small towns. It is all too common to find scenes like this in any small town you encounter. Almost entire blocks are now just empty spaces that already haven't been touched in years. Even in some towns, like this one, there seems to be almost no visible wear and tear. Yet why would a business want to start here, when they can travel 30 to 40 minutes to a larger city with more people and an active business district? While I was traveling around Iowa, it became the norm to come into a small town and find it to be barren, with almost nobody there. It became odd to find a town where a main street was packed and people out shopping. I knew small towns were beginning to fade, but I never really realized how much. Both of my parents are from small towns in Wisconsin, and we constantly go back to visit yearly. The towns my parents are from have been looking pretty rough since I was a child, so abandoned buildings and factories were just the norm for me. When I saw small towns in movies or on TV, like the one in Back to the Future, I remember thinking that this must be how all other small towns are. I kept this mentality until pretty recently, one that said, even if I'm seeing this small town right now that is falling apart, a majority of them must be doing better than this because so many look good on TV. Very early it became clear to me that this mentality was completely wrong. It feels kind of crazy to look at a structure like this and realize that 50 or 60 years ago, this building would have been very important for the economy and for the people of the town it is in. Now it sits as an empty building and gets chipped away bit by bit every year, without anyone giving it a second glance. Whenever I hear small towns, I always think of a movie like The Sandlot, a small 1960s town with a carnival, 4th of July block parties, and a local swimming pool for everyone to hang out at. I think Hollywood and the media in general skewed the way I perceived the world when I was younger and even now. You might be looking at this picture and be thinking, this doesn't look like a small town. And you'd be right. This is New York City. But I think this picture gives us a good look into why or how my perception was skewed. This is a typical street view of a big city. A large amount of movies depict large cities like this, showing how well off and modern they are. I think I took this nostalgic view of American cinematography and projected it on the whole United States. Even in Back to the Future, it literally had a small town set in the future, still looking nice and modern, not a place with empty storefronts and crumbling buildings. This 1937 view of San Francisco shows people standing in line trying to get a job at the tail end of the Depression. I think this image is a perfect foreshadowing to what a small town in America had yet to become. If people in large cities can't find a job, how are people supposed to find one in a small town? Looking at pictures like this one makes me wish I could go back to this time, to the height of small towns in the beginning and mid-19th century, a time when everyone would be going downtown to get what they needed from 4 or 5 different stores instead of a single trip to one big store. Downtown used to be more than just a place where you can go to grab a quick bite and get a to-go coffee and then head home. Downtown was the town. No one had a TV or computer yet, so people were out interacting with each other. You would have had to go downtown to get a paper from the local paper boy to find out what is happening in the world. People still interact and go downtown, but it's a little bit different now. Now you have to have an actual plan to go downtown, deciding if you want to drive, bike, walk, or catch the bus to go. If you drive, you have to pay for parking. If you bike, you need to leave it on a bike stand, chain it, and hope no one steals it. If you want to take the bus, you have to find the routes you want to take and make sure you align your shopping with the bus schedule. And why would you walk when you can take one of the other three options and not walk? Even before this, you need to figure out why you would even go there in the first place. In many of the towns I visited, I found remnants of what used to be movie theaters. It must have been awesome going to a premiere downtown with the illuminated signs telling you what you would be seeing that night. Going to the movies used to be a spectacle. Now you can unlock your phone and start up your episode of Friends wherever you left off at. This shows a prime example of our country's evolution. This also seems to be the main reason for people leaving small towns and never coming back. You can almost do anything you want from your home now. You can call whoever you want on your phone. You have any piece of information you could want right at your fingertips. You can even have your food delivered directly to your house from the grocery store or any eating establishment. And especially now, you can just work from home. I find that this point in our country's evolution is a very interesting one. If you had asked the architects of this building what it would be used for in 70 years, I bet the last thing they would have guessed was a plant-vegan restaurant. You can obviously tell that this building used to be a movie theater because of the two masks carved into the stone that are associated with theater. It was a very deliberate thing that probably cost a lot of money, but definitely adds to the effect of going to the movies. Today, some stores throw up a printed sign on their storefront instead of a more intricate one like shown in this picture. Some stores now don't care about their appearance or are trying to save a few dollars. I found many examples similar to this in other small towns as well. I think this notion of having your sign built into the building gives acknowledgement to the idea of how much time and care was spent into designing these buildings. This building says bank. The owner-designer of the bank was so confident in the business that they had it made as a physical part of the building. Even though this bank went out of business, it has still left its footprint that will probably stay until the building gets torn down. This picture also illustrates how capitalism is ingrained into all aspects of America, even in small towns. It may not be very apparent, but the building on the corner in the background is also a bank. I'm not sure if both were operating at the same time, but this aftermath shows the result of two different companies trying to get to the top, and only one succeeding. The bank in the background was also the nicest building in the whole town. Money definitely talks. I think it's really interesting to look at these buildings that have been made for one thing and are currently being used for another. Here's another example of a reused space. This used to be a storefront and has now been converted into a church. I find this especially interesting as the primary thing that these small towns share is that they all have proper churches. Every single town had about 2 or 3 churches, yet some still had these businesses turned churches. It feels weird seeing a place of commerce turned into a place of worship. The whole atmosphere just seemed tainted and unauthentic. I think this feeling was heightened with the Trump 2020 sign hanging in the window above the entrance. The advocacy that conservatives have for President Trump is leaning heavily towards idolatry in my eye, which goes directly against the Second Commandment. There were a few sights that I saw while traveling that made me realize how far we have come from the golden age of small towns. I'm not saying a main street filled with Mexican restaurants and stores is a bad thing. I'm just saying it's definitely not what I expected to see when going to a small town in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. However weird this sight was, it made perfect sense. There was a meatpacking plant just outside of this town that historically and currently hires Mexican workers. Because of this, many Mexicans and Spanish-speaking people have moved into the town, and the town has adapted. I went to this town about halfway through all of my traveling, and it finally made me realize that this is 2020, and small towns have to evolve with the people around them. The abandoned storefronts, boarded-up windows, and repurposed buildings are just the result of time and the inevitable creep of age that comes with it. Another sight that made me realize how far we have come is one like this, an advertisement painted onto the side of a building. Just like the sign that sits on the front side of your store, advertisements like this help people see you from all angles. Also, just like the sign, a lot of time and effort was put into ads like this. It needed to be planned, and then the plans needed to be communicated with the painter, and then the painter would have to take hours painting this ad to a high degree of quality. It is unfortunate as we no longer use this type of advertisement much anymore, Most of the ads you will see will be on a screen or some sort of pole 40 feet in the air on the side of the highway, almost all being made digitally. This type of art is almost all but forgotten. Many of these ads even showed a previous ad peeking through underneath the layers of paint. While the architectural structures help speak to the past, they are not the only thing in these photos to do so. In photos, it is very easy to tell what decade you are looking at by the makes and models of the cars you see. It is also fun to look back and see what types of cars used to be around and what used to be normal. The vehicles help set the tone for the entire scene. It also helps remind you of the technologies used in the past and can show you how far we have come since then. Seeing these types of cars automatically makes me think of a movie like Grease. Yet another instance of me being indoctrinated by American popular culture. The cars in this picture even speak about the time period. The hard corners and accompanied by subtle curves give notion to the general attitude of the people of the time. I have heard numerous stories from people older than me of their parents beating them as punishment. At this time, they had only been about 10 years removed from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. People were very blunt and would let you know what was up. If you were complaining about your depression to a friend, they would respond to your story with a quick, "Oh yeah, same," and pass you the bottle. You couldn't ask for help, as you would have been seen as weak. However stern this time was, the 70s are considered one of the better times in American history. If you look at this picture, starting on the left side, you can see a 70s style car. But once your eye starts to move around, you suddenly realize that this picture is from current times with modern cars lining the streets. This picture almost looks photoshopped, as if I cut and pasted the modern cars into the scene. I remember being here and feeling heavily disoriented because of the whole ambiance of everything there. Going into each small town was like stepping back in time to when the buildings were built. I get a similar feeling whenever I go to the beach on the coast. It feels as if the moment isn't real, as if it's just a movie playing out right in front of you. It's a very surreal feeling. I think most of it is just myself yearning to step back 60 to 70 years into the past. However, this is real. This is 2020. Everything that has happened in this town has led up to this picture. Time has taken its toll and will keep moving on without a second thought. This transformation of small towns has actually been apparent for some time now. If the date was not on the screen, I can almost guarantee you would be perplexed as to what decade this photo came from. Even in the mid-1980s, Andrew Borowiec was capturing towns that were already beginning to lose their shape. I could go to any small town neighboring Iowa City and find an image that looks practically identical to this one. This picture is from nearly 40 years ago, but could easily be replicated even by just walking to downtown Iowa City. In a recent interview about his work, Borowiec said, "I think much of my work is an elegy for an idea of America that seems increasingly tenuous and endangered. The country's manufacturing regions have been in steady decline since the 1980s, and people who expected that a lifetime of hard work would earn them some semblance of the American dream are instead losing their job, their home, and their place in the world. The circumstances of the post-industrial Rust Belt reflect an increasingly ubiquitous inequality found throughout 21st century America, where most people aren't as well off as they had hoped to be. 70 years ago, you could move to any town in America, get just about any minimum wage job, and be set until you retire. Today, almost any good-paying job requires a college education, and minimum wage will barely pay for your monthly rent, let alone any other expenses that come along with being human. Although small-town America is in the process of fading away, it still brings with it that small-town charm. What's left of them will bring you back into a different time. Going into small towns is like getting a double shot of nostalgia in your morning coffee. Looking at all of the old buildings, you get to speculate on what used to be there and how people may have interacted in that space. Even if small-town America is on the decline, I'm glad we still have gems like these. Businesses like these are what give small-town America their character. I hope these are the last part of small-town America that fade away into time.